Aloha and welcome. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about list nesting. So what do we know about lists so far? Well, a list is a sequence of objects. And if we think about it, a list itself is actually an object. So a list can contain a list as an element. And when we do this, we call that list nesting. So a list is a one-dimensional, it's a one-dimensional array, essentially. So it's an array of items, a sequence of items. And if you put in as one of the elements another array or another list, then you get what we call a multi-dimensional list or a multi-dimensional array, if you want to think of it in those terms. So it's really useful. I use it quite a lot in different data structures that I build. So when we're building these things, if we want to access the data, we want to be as uniform as we can in dealing with it. And we want to be careful, because if you're going to programmatically go about parsing it, going through it, you're going to want to use for loops to go through it. So let me, instead of talking about these vague terms, let me go ahead and show you an example of what I'm talking about. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Let's pull up VS Code, and the VS Code, if I could just find it here. Okay. So we're going to use VS Code, and I'll start with something that is a real world example that I've actually used in the past. So I have a little Raspberry Pi, and Raspberry Pi is a neat little credit card size computer that has little sensors and things that you can attach to it. And those sensors, one of the sensors I have is a temperature humidity recorder, or a temperature humidity sensor. So I write a little bit of a Python script for it, and every minute I have it go to that device and pull in a reading that gives me both the temperature and the humidity, and they're both in floating point form. So once I get that, I can ask the system, hey, what time is it right now? So then I'll have the date and time, as well as the temperature and the humidity. So I can take that data and I can store it into different lists. So if we're thinking about temperatures, we could have something like temperatures, and we could have, 87.5, 75.3, 66.4, and we can have a list of temperatures, and we could likewise have a list of humidities. So humidities, we could have 45.7, we could have 45.2, we could have 43.4, like this. But if we're getting these things at the same time, it would be nice to kind of pair them together. And that's where the idea of a nested list comes in. So I could say data points, as it's going to be my new structure here. So I'll make it a list. And then for our first element, I'll have, let's say, the 87.5 combined with that 45.7. And then I'll have a second element in here that is going to be the 75.3 and the 45.2. And then I'll have my third element there, which is the 66.4 and the 43.4 there. So if I go and I take this and I print out data points and take a look at it, it shows that we have these three different lists within a list. So if we want to access those things, we could do a for loop. So we can say for data point in data points, and then we can print out data point. And when we do that, it gives us each one singularly. So while we're going through that, we can remember this technique we call unpacking. So we can go in here and we can say, since we know it's temp humidity, we can say equals data point, and that's going to essentially take the two items and assign it to temp and humidity. So then we just go over here and we do a little print we're going to do an F string print here. We're going to say temp is temp and humidity is humidity. And when we do that, let's go ahead and comment this out because we're going to steal this print statement's thunder. And we do that, and we are able to utilize that. So this is the way we can do this. And you can add complexity to this. Let's say that not only did you want to have your temperature humidity, let's say you also wanted to throw in a date with it. You could have the first element being the date. So we could go back up here and say data points, and we could set a date like 2023-01-01, and then we could have the second one be 2023-01-02, and then we could have the third one be 2023-01-03. You see where I'm going with this. So once we do that, remember, we have to go over here and change the way we do this. We have to say date there, and then we'll just, we'll have date, oops, put in here, and voila, it'll give us this nice little printout. So that is really nice. We could do this in different ways. You don't necessarily have to put, you know, your date right here. You could make it where you had date as a string, and then you could have here a list with these two data points. You know, there's all kinds of ways for you to package that information up. And really that comes down to your creativity and hopefully with an idea for efficiency when you're going through that. But you're going to have to remember that when you're packing this up into a certain way, you need to know how to unpack that, you know, later on so you can make use of it. So when we're building that array, keep in mind that later on you're going to have to access the different things that you've got in that list. I'm saying array, but really I'm thinking about lists here, multi-dimensional lists. So I hope this is helpful. I hope that this is something that you can make use of. I know in looking at previous work that you guys have done that nested loops was one of the areas that a lot of people had some difficulty. So this kind of a thing may be difficult for you. If you have any trouble with it, please reach out to me and ask me questions. That's what I'm here for. I'd be more than happy to sit down with you, go through some of these examples, talk to you about it, and try to help you understand the concepts. Because at the end of the day, this is something that you'll really use. I use it a lot. I've done a lot of work using different arrays and or lists as as we're using here, and it's really convenient when you're storing data. It's just something you will be using. Trust me, you can't get away from this. You will be using it if you're ever processing data. If you're ever going through, let's say, an Excel document. Let's say you're just trying to grab data out of an Excel document and you're going cell by cell, row by row. You can already see that you've got multi-dimensional arrays there. So you've got A1, A2, A3, A4. The example that we worked on earlier, you'll recall we had a seating chart. And again, it's the same idea. You've got different cells in there. So you could, represent that with lists, lists of lists. So there's lots of different ways to do that. So think about that. Again, if you have any questions, send me an email, reach out. I'd be glad to, sit down with you. Again, I know this is probably one of those problem areas, dealing with nested loops and things like that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll see you in the next lesson.